Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm thrilled to bring you part 6 of Eureka, a guide to the mysticism. Get ready to dive deeper into the mysterious world of spirits, secrets, and the strange paths of the Beyonders. I hope you enjoy this chapter of the story, and if you do, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and show your support. Now, without further ado, let's step right into the heart of the story.
Well, strictly speaking, I was talking to a spirit, but that's more or less not a big deal. Most spirits can hear people, but people can't hear or interact with them. So that's probably the best excuse. I'm just talking to myself. That could get awkward if I'm not sure who's watching. In this case, it went well because it was my brother. But if others don't see you talking to thin air, there are two possibilities. Either I'm crazy, or I'm a veil path Beander and I can communicate with ghosts. It also partly depends on the ritual or how I become a Beander, which would influence what powers I get. But in general, if I carry veil spirituality, I should normally be able to see spirits even without using my Necron ability, which in turn means no normal person besides me should be able to see spirits. Myra thinks as she spins lightly and takes in the bustle around her. Shall we go eat now? I'm hungry. Myra says, relieved that Ares' presence wasn't noticed by her brother. Since Ares is already hidden again inside the little elephant's body, there's little risk Theodore will carry the strange creature away because of his connections. It's time to test how effective my ability to see souls really is, Myra thinks as she focuses on Ares' soul while following Theodore. At first nothing happens, but then, as if Ares' soul has its own wavelength, like a fingerprint. Myra manages to tune to that one frequency and filter everything else out. Fuck. Why isn't this working? I can feel that I would see only Ares now, but I can't see through walls. I wish I had some kind of X-ray vision so I could combine it with my spirit sight and look through walls for ghosts. So I can see Ares only if she's in my line of sight, and since she isn't, this is useless. Maybe someday I can project my power onto a spirit and then look down on the city from far above. Or I could make some kind of spirit radar, but I doubt I'll manage that quickly. Myra thinks, then shifts her attention fully to Theodore. Okay. I'd say that's weird, but who am I deceiving? You're you. I didn't expect you to start talking to yourself, but whatever you want to do, whatever floats your boat. Where did you pick up that phrase? You wrote it to me in a letter a few months ago, but I don't remember where you heard it. Theodore says. Did you forget I have memory loss? I can't remember everything. Even if I had all my memories perfectly, I doubt you could quiz me on such specific details. How should I know where I heard it? Maybe in some cafe near our old home, or I invented it, or it just popped into my head. Maybe I made it up to sound clever. Myra answers, searching for words she really wants to ask and say. I have another question about the mysticism world. Could you put the delirium veil back on, please? She asks in an uncertain tone, as if what she's about to say matters. Sure, but what's so important that you're nervous? Did you do something? Theodore asks, looking overly casual as he snaps his fingers. A faint delirium fluctuation emits from the snap. Did it have to be that dramatic? A finger snap is a bit over the top. Anyway, my questions are simple. I noticed delirium's core concept is deception, and Veil's core concept is either death or concealment. I'm wondering why, concealment forgetting, which sounds like the opposite of seeking or revealing, isn't paired with Helios revelation illumination as opposites. Delirium is deception versus revelation, yes, but it doesn't quite make sense to me. Concealment seems like the natural opposite of seeking. Why aren't Helios and Veil opposites? Myra asks in that inquisitive tone that makes Theodore realize she won't let this go until she gets an answer. It takes Theodore a few seconds to find the right words. People around them make way without paying attention and quickly forget them. The crowd never seems to remember this sibling pair for long. That's a really good question. The concept of deception versus recognition, revelation of secrets, does contrast with veil, which conceals secrets. But deception is a stronger counter to revelation than simple concealment is. As you said, revelation opposes deception, and it also contrasts with concealment or secrecy. Deception fits more neatly as a counter to revelation. I can't describe it any better than that. Sorry, sister, but that's one of those answers I can't improve on right now. There might be other pairs of spiritualities that also contrast in odd ways, I think delirium and revelation also oppose each other because revelation deals with information itself and deception distorts information. So you could say those two don't harmonize, but for spiritualities in general it's messy and hard to say definitively. Theodore replies. So you're saying the opposing pairs, as they currently stand, are just accepted? I mean Helios opposite delirium and Veil opposite revelation and balance opposite dominion. But you're saying that spiritualities, even if they're opposites, don't perfectly cancel each other out. They don't fully negate one another, they just don't interact well and might interfere in certain areas, but not completely. Or am I misunderstanding, and spiritualities can actually erase each other? Myra asks, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, I'd agree with you in principle. Spiritualities are arranged in those opposing pairs. But it's not as set in stone as people might think. Some pairs resist each other more strongly than others. For example, Veil is a strong contradiction to revelation. Still, it's not absolutely impossible, just very difficult, to combine those opposites. Spiritualities that aren't direct opposites interact differently. I can't tell you exactly what determines how strongly one spirituality repels another. About the opposition stuff, I can't give you anything much clearer. You're right to some extent that Veil would pair well with Helios. Veil hides secrets and Helios reveals them. So they are opposites in a sense, but that's only one expression of those spiritualities. Officially, though, delirium is considered Helios's counterpart. Sorry I can't be more helpful, little sister, Theodore says in a casual tone, a friendly sparkle in his green eyes. A moment of silence follows as people around them give way and barely notice them while Mira drifts back into thought. Thanks for being patient with me, Theodore. I really appreciate that you're not as overprotective as the old man. I understand the risk and that it's hard for you to just let me make my own choices. Whether I become a Beander or not, thanks for the freedom, Myra says with genuine gratitude in her voice. Okay, where's this coming from? Theodore asks, surprised, as they find a restaurant that suits their standards. It's one of the largest, most luxurious restaurants in the northern quarter of Averin. Both exterior and interior are carefully decorated in white and gold. The chairs and walls are elegant, the chairs are upholstered in white fabric for comfort, and the walls are dark wood. Candles and torches provide a warm, pleasing light. What the hell, why are there full torches burning inside a room and the air isn't smoky? Did I miss something, or does this world simply work differently than Mark Tesla's? I'm pretty sure that many torches in an enclosed space should make smoke. But they don't. Is that a mystical effect or something else? Maybe certain fires here don't produce smoke or consume oxygen. That could be, this world might have things like that, Myra thinks as her mind wanders over the odd architecture, gravity quirks, and other normal but strange features of this world. Given the oddities, buildings and bridges arranged in surprising ways that don't sway even in strong winds, it isn't hard to imagine there are flames that simply don't make smoke. Well, what can I say? I can imagine you worry about me. After all, you forbade me from riding an insect again after your first accident. You thought I might fall, and you were protective. So it must be hard for you to just leave this decision to me, whether I want to become a Beander or not. Thanks for giving me that freedom and not obsessing over my well-being, Myra says, pulling herself out of thought and looking back at her brother. His black hair dances in the wind sweeping through Averin streets. The restaurant door opens without resistance. It doesn't squeak, a sign of the care the staff take. A table for two, please, Theodore says, glad it isn't too crowded and they didn't need a reservation. Certainly, sir, madam. I'll show you to a suitable table. It's quiet today, so you may choose freely, the suited man says with a friendly smile. It doesn't take long for Myra to pick a pleasant table bathed in midday sun. Okay, so did you turn the effect off just now? Myra asks, unable to stop wondering whether they were noticeable because of her brother or because of something else. Of course I turned the effect off, otherwise we couldn't order here, Theodore replies. These abilities are interesting, but that path isn't right for me. Should pick a path that actually supports me. Or maybe Helios, but that doesn't quite fit. Revelation or Veil might be good. But Revelation is almost completely vanished from this world, I think. Theodore didn't confirm it outright, Myra thinks as she enjoys her meal. Hey, brother, what happened to Revelation? Why is there so little of it? Myra asks suddenly, staring out the window as her tea steams. It's a question Theodore hadn't expected, but when he explains it becomes clear how dangerous the revelation path is. Revelation is just full of forbidden, toxic knowledge. With today's means, as far as I know, it's not possible to become a revelation beyander. It's far too dangerous because of the toxic knowledge involved, and I honestly don't know how anyone would achieve it. You'd need almost perfect immunity to toxic knowledge, which doesn't exist. There's no object that grants near-perfect immunity, and it's not even clear what determines someone's resistance. So in this age there simply hasn't been a revelation beyander, Theodore says, raising an eyebrow as he watches his sister at the window. What's going through that little head of yours? Theodore asks, sensing something's off. It's nothing special. I'm just curious, Myra says as her gaze returns to her tea and she takes a sip. So I can't say whether I'm immune to toxic knowledge or not. But from what's been said, it sounds like there are different degrees of resistance to that stuff, Myra thinks as a dangerous idea occurs to her. If every person has some indeterminate resistance to toxic knowledge that can't be directly observed, then there's only an indirect way to find out what that resistance is, and that's something that can be tested. What are you planning exactly? And don't tell me you're planning nothing, I can see it in your eyes, Theodore says, his green eyes seeming to bore into Myra's thoughts. I noticed something, brother. I think I might have a very high resistance to that stuff and its negative effects. I don't feel different except for a healthy amount of curiosity. So I can't say yet whether I want to test it or not, Myra admits, half certain that he already guesses the answer. That may well be. But I've never heard what actually determines resistance to toxic knowledge. Yes, there are theories, but I've never heard that anyone in our age really knows why some people withstand slightly more toxic knowledge than others. And the difference is usually minimal. Still, I also have the impression that you have a higher resistance than I would have expected, Theodore replies cautiously, and even as he says it he can't help scanning their surroundings warily. No one knows that the detective from the Department of Esoteric Affairs is a beyander of the primary spiritual path Helios with delirium is a secondary spirituality, truth and illusion combined. That's a tightly guarded secret. Which in turn means no one who might be spying on them should notice that attention is being diverted away from them. After a few seconds of observation Theodore can find no sign of anyone paying them direct attention. That could be taken as evidence that no one is spying on them. Not that it's statistically likely, it's just the kind of paranoia that runs in the Silverstar family. And if you want to know, I can tell you how I think we could test it, but it would be dangerous, Myra says with a smile. What is it? Theodore asks as he reads that smile on his sister's face. It's simple, but risky. You tell me something dangerous, knowledge that's potentially toxic, directly. If I feel differently than usual, I tell you. That way you or I can see whether my behavior changes. It's an easy way to gauge how resistant I am to toxic knowledge, Myra says, and her words surprise her brother. So you want me to poison you? Theodore asks. Exactly, Myra replies, leaning back into the soft, comfortable chair and looking at her brother's green eyes. For a moment concern flashes into Theodore's face, then recognition flickers behind his green and gold-flecked eyes. The logic of the experiment is hard to deny. But that's dangerous, and I don't want to harm you. If I transmit toxic knowledge to you without your knowing, it's just risky. And I don't want it to be risky. Also, it's not like I know a lot of crude secrets I could just tell you, Theodore says, waving and signaling for the check. They fall silent for a moment while the waitress brings the bill and they pay. Only once they've left the restaurant and glanced around do they continue the conversation, no gestures or words needed to agree that they should be cautious for the time being. I think you're overlooking that legends, stories and even simple tales from books, the experiences of a beyander, can develop into toxic knowledge. And I think you're overlooking that if we actively look for signs of toxic knowledge affecting me, sooner or later you or I will see whether my immunity or resistance manifests. The risk is fairly low if we actively watch for behavioral changes. That information could be important. In the unlikely event I'm partially or fully immune to toxic knowledge, it would change how I act. If I'm not completely immune, at least we'll know roughly what degree of toxic knowledge I can withstand. That's useful. Also, different toxic poisons or different books can have different effects.
The Dominion Path text, for instance, dealing with emotions, might amplify feelings. so we could pick texts with potentially small but noticeable effects. It's pattern recognition, which mystical texts affect me and how, Myra explains as sunlight catches her cheek and reflects in her white hair, giving her an exotic beauty. That actually makes some sense, but it's not like I have a stack of those legends right here. At the Department of Esoteric Affairs we have some of those old tales. I can look for a story that I'm authorized to take out without raising questions. A text that has the right kind of effects I should be able to find. But remember, even so, I'd need a long time to read it. We couldn't do this for months. I can't just hand you those mystical books so you can read them now. But you're right, I have a good feeling. Theodore's voice trails off. Although it seems highly unlikely anyone could penetrate the delirium effect that diverts everyone's attention, that would require a Helios meander, and even then it would leave traces of Helios spirituality. For Theodore that means it's almost impossible someone could pierce that diversion without leaving marks his Helios sense would notice. That you have an above-average resistance to toxic knowledge, but I doubt toxic knowledge allows for absolute immunity. Even if such immunity existed, I don't know how you'd prove it without risking your life, since higher levels of toxic knowledge or mental influence could be lethal to someone who isn't resistant. So we can only test up to a certain level, Theodore says as they step out of the crowd near the Lunatica Cathedral. It's a shame, I would have liked to test it for future reference, in case I'm exposed to toxic knowledge, Myra says, slightly frustrated that her plan won't be feasible in the immediate future. You're not going to try this alone, are you? Theodore asks. No, you don't need to worry. I can restrain myself, even if I'm curious. But it would help to know roughly how long it takes people to read those books. It depends on the type of cognitive poison and on how you process and understand it. From what I've understood, if I don't understand something, the toxic knowledge won't affect me. So theoretically I could absorb cognitive poison without activating it, and later weaponize that knowledge without needing other powers. Alternatively, I could try to create indirect immunity by deliberately controlling my perception so I don't understand the words when I read them. If I can manage to not understand something on purpose, I might be safe. But there's a weakness. There might be visual cognitive poison, and I can't avoid seeing images. Logically, I could only protect myself against what I hear or read. Whether these theories will actually work, I don't know, and I'm not keen to test them. Training that would be hard. But in theory it should be possible, right, Theodore? Myra asks, her surprising thoughtfulness and intelligence catching her brother off guard. Okay, I already knew you were clever, but you keep surprising me. I've never really thought about cognitive poison this way. I always treated cognitive poison as something you must avoid, not as a subject whose nature can be explored like anything else. I would never have thought to try to manipulate my perception. Says Theodore, pleasantly surprised, as they walk together across the large marketplace, eyeing the various stalls. From tiny inconspicuous herb shops to larger booths selling all sorts of goods, everything seems to be there. Theoretically, it should be possible to manipulate cognitive poison by controlling perception. Oh, and can you still maintain the delirium effect? Is it tiring for you? And how does spirituality regenerate? You didn't write much about that in the book, except that it can regenerate over time. You described spirituality as if it were a lake inside you that you can draw from and that refills. And you're currently using that teaching to manage your spirituality. How do you regenerate yours? I don't want to unnecessarily weaken you if you might need it later, for your job or whatever. Myra asks as her brother, to her surprise, leads her to a small, unassuming herb stall. Don't worry about it, the spiritual consumption isn't high. Especially because I'm not even creating full illusions. I'm not really deceiving anyone that deeply. What I do is make the important parts of our conversation be perceived as something else or be ignored. I don't manipulate a lot with delirium. It just doesn't stay in most people's awareness for long, aside from us. The delirium effect isn't that strong when there aren't many people actively trying to observe us. The effect becomes exponentially harder to maintain the more powerful the individuals watching us are, or the larger the number of people trying to observe despite the effect. Theodore explains, turning to the old, bent woman behind the herb counter. I'll have a packet of Black Moon herb tea, please. Theodore says. The old woman turns toward her customers like someone with dim eyesight, yet her gaze falls directly on the two of them. Ah, so you're one of them. Well, good luck with whatever you're up to. That'll be 5 sickles and 23 marks. She says, producing a small pouch of leaves from under the counter. That's a bit expensive for tea, Myra murmurs uncertainly as Theodore pays. That's because this tea has a calming effect on the mind and an anti-cognitive poison property. You could say it's infused with balanced spirituality and helps against those kinds of effects. It's by no means the strongest antidote, but I want you to have it. If you feel different after consuming cognitive poison or after the conversation we're having, I want you to brew it when you get back to the hotel tonight. Theodore says, a trace of concern in his voice. It's touching when Theodore presses the expensive packet of tea into her hand. Thanks. But what now? What's the exact plan? We can't just stroll around a Varon all afternoon out of boredom. Where are we heading? You seem like you already have a plan. Myra asks as they thread through the crowd past the Lunatica Cathedral toward a destination she doesn't yet recognize. Yes, I have something planned for today. We're going to a branch of Equipaceum. Theodore replies, but his brisk pace and serious expression make it clear this is important and possibly a little dangerous. What exactly is this, Equipaceum? Is it an organization? Myra asks. To be specific, Equipaceum is an organization of merchants who sell everything except living organisms, from weapons to mystical objects. They sell almost anything, though prices are astronomically high for most items. They don't ask many questions about what you want to buy. They're the largest trading organization I know of. I don't think there's ever been a bigger merchant guild in this era. If you want to buy something, you can probably find it there. I just want you to be careful and not to buy from other groups that might try to rob you. I'll just show you how it works. Theodore says, just as a familiar elephant steps onto the marketplace from a side street. It's too late for Myra to signal Ares Blackstone, who is hiding inside the elephant's mind, to retreat. When Theodore's gaze falls on the elephant, Myra feels her heart skip a beat. Wait here for me, Myra. I think I have something I need to take care of. Theodore says as he tries to move toward the elephant. Time seems to slow as Theodore attempts to approach discreetly, but the elephant, controlled by Ares, turns and slips back into the street. No, wait, brother, the elephant isn't important. We weren't being watched, it's nothing. Myra says, grabbing his arm to stop him. When Theodore's green eyes meet her heterochromatic ones, it hits him like a hammer. Why did you stop me from following the elephant? I hope you have a good explanation. Theodore says, suddenly different, trying to understand his sister's secrets. I can't really tell you everything. I lied about something. It's not that ideas in my head produce cognitive poison per se. It's tied to the same topic I can't tell you about. It's a secret that carries cognitive poison on a level I'd fear would be dangerous to you. Myra says, worried. What does that have to do with the elephant? Theodore asks. I don't know how to explain, but please trust me, the elephant wasn't sent by someone spying on us. It's not a sect, and no one wanted to harm us. It was just observing and couldn't hear what we said. The distance was too great. Even if the delirium effect was penetrated, which you would know best, an elephant that size wouldn't be able to hear us. So just let it be. Myra replies honestly. There's a few seconds of silence as Theodore's analytical gaze almost seems to pierce her soul. Okay. I guess you won't tell me more. I hope you have your reasons. I hope you'll tell me eventually. Theodore says, surprised at the depth of his trust. Okay, I promise I'll tell you someday, but not yet. Myra says, and her words prick her heart. If I didn't know it was you, I'd think you were under someone's control, but the Lunatica priest assured me your soul and mind are intact. Theodore says and glances at her from the corner of his eye, making it clear this isn't over. You did what? You had a priest look at my soul directly. What if he discovered secrets, hidden feelings or something? Myra protests as they amble past more of the marketplace toward the Donatica district. The Lunatica Cathedral looks far more majestic up close than it did from a distance. Strictly speaking, the Lunatica priest couldn't do anything beyond what the ritual permits. The ritual can't just do arbitrary things. I was there the whole time while you were unconscious and the ritual was performed. So you needn't worry. The ritual only checked for anomalies in your body. For example, whether your mind had been manipulated by cognitive poison or whether you were possessed by a spirit. There are cases where people on the Veil path can control spirits and make them control someone else, but that wasn't the case with you. If anything, you looked a bit too healthy after the mystical incident. Theodore explains. Then we're even. I kept a secret from you, and you did something without asking me. Myra says, trying to make up for her earlier slip-ups and to avoid having to share the secret later. No, we're not even. You still have a secret about the mystical world. That doesn't balance things out. I still want to know why the elephant did what it did and how you knew the delirium effect might have been pierced. You shouldn't have that ability yet. Or have you already started walking a meander path? If so, which spirituality did you choose? Theodore asks as they leave the marketplace and turn into one of the many streets leading off it. Honestly, I don't know what to say about that. It's not like I plan to join some sect or anything. That's nonsense. If anything, I want to have these adventures by myself or follow a meander path. And I can't explain the secret I carry, or the elephant thing, to you in full because I see the real danger. It would drive you mad. Cognitive poison must not be underestimated. From what we've already talked about, I get the strong impression that even if I tried to summarize the dangerous parts only halfway, it would still be too much for you. So you can't make me risk driving you insane by telling you the whole truth. It doesn't matter whether you believe me or not. Myra says in an unnaturally firm, determined voice that leaves no doubt she won't be persuaded on that matter. That actually makes me more curious, but don't worry, I won't cry. I'm too busy to spend my time digging up your secret. I'm ready for you to tell me when you're ready. But I want you to promise me that if you need my help, you'll accept it and call on me at any time. You matter to me. I couldn't accept seeing you hurt or in danger if there's something I could do about it. Theodore replies in a tone somewhere between worry and uncertainty. Myra flinches slightly. Theodore notices the physical reaction to her feelings. All right, so that's that then. Somehow I expected it to go differently. I thought we'd have a louder argument, some heated back and forth. Myra says as they turn another corner and stop in front of a fairly large flower shop. Well, conversations rarely go the way you expect. And I can tell when you're telling the truth, or at least when you believe you are, and I see no reason to keep pushing if you won't relent. Whether I think you're telling the truth or not, you won't give in. I know your stubbornness. I'd rather hope the future brings answers than waste energy on a talk that ends up as hot air. I trust that you want the best for both of us. Theodore says as he looks at his little sister, changed, yes, but understandably so after almost dying in that mystical incident, during what was supposed to be a routine journey. And now, is this market for mystical objects in that flower shop? Myra asks. That's correct. This is an equipasum trading branch. It's basically a market for all sorts of things. But I don't plan to go inside. It would cost me too much energy to extend the delirium effect over our identities. The more complex the object I try to mask with deception, the harder it gets for me. I could go in alone and apply the delirium effect only to myself so no one remembers me clearly. But doing that for two people is nearly impossible. So we'll do it the old-fashioned way. I'll keep the delirium effect on our voices. Remember, unless we're talking to each other, people will still remember conversations they have with us. My delirium is focused so our conversation appears normal and unimportant and thus diverts attention from what we say, not from who we are. To be clear, while people won't notice our talk, what you say to others can still be noticed, even if the precise tone or pitch of your voice won't stick in their memory. Theodore explains. Oh holy, does that mean my brother can really do all that? Divert people's attention from something. That's an amazingly practical infiltration ability. He could go someplace and no one would remember he was there. I want that power too, but I can't walk every meander path at once. That would be ridiculous, and finding all those rituals would be impossible. Even if you could, you'd presumably have to do them all at once. Resource nightmare. Still, I wonder if you could pick a purely single path, only delirium or only Helios. What would happen if someone chose pure delirium or pure Helios without mixing? Myra thinks as Theodore leads her down a side street to change clothes, handing her a mask and a cloak. Won't it be too conspicuous if we walk in like that? Myra asks when a veil is pressed into her hand. No, it won't. The people at Equipasum are used to very unusual customers. Disguises aren't extraordinary in the mystical world. Most Beyonders prefer to hide their identities. Apart from Delirium and Veil Beyonders, it's basically the rule. Veil Beyonders might have mystical objects that conceal appearance, but Veil doesn't create illusions, it only hides. If I were more experienced with Delirium, I wouldn't strictly need a disguise because I could make illusions, but I'm still working on that. Theodore says as they finish dressing. It's a surprisingly simple but effective outfit. A white mask and large, roughly cut black cloaks and jackets that make the body shape hard to identify. And that wraps up today's video. I hope you enjoyed this latest chapter of Eureka, a guide to the mysticism. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and share the channel with your friends to help spread the story. Don't forget, on the left side of your screen, you'll see the link to my newest video, and on the right side, you can explore the playlist with all the parts of the story so far. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.